Hey, what is going on, everyone? It's me, Mr. Mario, and oh, look, some of you all might be thinking, another YouTuber hopping onto this DKOldies bandwagon, and I guess we're doing a little bit of that. However, I did want to get my take on here and do something a little bit different. You see, for anybody who does not know, there is a US-based video game reselling shop where you can buy, sell, trade your different video games, peripherals, consoles, all that fun stuff, known as DKOldies. They've been around for quite a while, it seems, and it seems like they've also been more overpriced than much of the other competition they've had. However, in recent times, really the last 2 or 3 years, they've really blown up quite a bit thanks to their TikTok presence, the TikTok audience that they're getting, and there's then been a lot of people who have been purchasing these games, purchasing these consoles from DKOldies. However, recently here, there's been a wave of people who have been purchasing consoles from DKOldies, making videos about them, and showing that these consoles are not really in the best shape. Now, typically, if you're getting a hold of a used console that might be a little bit dirty and everything, yeah, that's kind of to be expected. And if you paid a little too much for it, then hey, maybe you could have done a little more research buying it from somewhere else if you wanted to pay less money. However, the big difference here is that DKOldies seems to pride themselves on refurbished consoles, and in many different instances and videos and examples we've seen, these consoles are either not being refurbished or they're being refurbished improperly. Now, for some of the issues that I've been seeing here, first of all, of course, is overpriced consoles, but I'm not going to lean too much on that just because some people might want to pay, I don't know, a whole lot of money for this PlayStation 2, for example, and if you want to do that, that's totally up to you. However, the big thing, as I said here, is that every single one of these consoles claim to be refurbished, and sometimes it doesn't even look like they're being refurbished right here. We have seen examples of a PlayStation 2, for example, that hasn't even been cracked open. So when the console's not cracked open, it clearly can't be properly refurbished. We've also seen other examples like an Xbox 360 that it looks like it was opened up and it had dust blown out of it, but the thermal paste on the CPU and GPU dies was not replaced. That is over 15-year-old thermal paste right there. And some of these consoles just look absolutely disgusting. There's no excuse for this here, especially if you're saying you're refurbishing these systems. Now, for any of the naysayers here, you might say DKOldies made a video showing their refurbishing process. I did watch that video, and I gotta say, I wasn't really impressed with the process. You see, in this video, it shows that they pick up a Wii which is not reading games. So what do? They take it apart just far enough to replace the laser or the DVD drive. I say "or" there because they use both terms. They say replace the laser, and they also talk about the DVD drive. It's not confirmed which part they ended up replacing. However, I also noticed they blew air into the system when it was just halfway taken apart, then they put it back together, then they end up cleaning up the outsides and all the ports and everything with the system intact. This, to me, in my opinion, is not a proper refurbishing. This here was just a half measure to get the system up and running just enough to a point where they can sell it as a working Wii, and then making it cosmetically look good enough that they can get it out the door. I also believe this console only got this much attention on it just because it had a problem. If it was a properly working console and it was still going under their refurbishing process, it would not have gotten nearly this much attention. Now, what am I going to be doing for this video here? Well, I will say I could have done what many other people were doing. I could have gone over to the website, paid for an overpriced console, unboxed it, taken it apart, poked fun at it, laughed at it, and show what they were doing wrong there. However, I didn't want to do this for a couple of reasons. Number one, this has already been done several times over by several people here on the platform, so there's not much else to prove there. We do see that these consoles are overpriced and they're really not being taken care of properly in their refurbishing process. Number two, also, because they are overpriced, that is a really expensive thing to spend money on, and I'll be honest, if I wanted to spend that kind of money on some crap like this, I would just buy a bunch of laxatives, but I'm not going to be doing that either. I'm going to be showing you all something completely different. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take an Xbox 360 like I have hooked up back there, and I'm going to rip it apart, and I'm going to show you all the bare minimum of what DKOldies should be doing to classify one of their consoles as a refurbished console. Now keep in mind, just for transparency's sake, I am not a professional when it comes to this. I am just, I would say, a hobbyist at best here. I do not own or operate or work out of a video game shop where I am buying, selling, trading video games, video game consoles, accessories, all that fun stuff. This is just stuff that I like to do here on the channel and even as a hobbyist as well too, just taking care of refurbishing, upgrading, modifying, doing all kinds of fun stuff to video game consoles. It's just something that I enjoy doing. I've bought my fair share of broken consoles, I've brought several back from the dead, and I guess in terms of business here, I did work for a local mom and pop video game store for a couple years. However, this was during the 7th generation, so like the Wii, Xbox 360, PlayStation 3. That is to say though, I bring that up because I do want to clarify that I at least understand the basics of the business here, what should be done, what isn't being done, and I know enough to say that some of these prices here are just shameful.
Alright, well, getting right into this here, for this demonstration, we have something that I'm just a bit familiar with, a standard fat Xbox 360, a Jasper motherboard at that. From what I can tell on here, I picked this console up at a thrift store within the last few years and paid no more than $25 for it. Most likely I bought it on sale, meaning I paid less than what's written here. It isn't in horrible shape, mind you, but we'll go through the process of what a game shop should be doing to properly test and then sell a console like this as a refurbished console. First of all, what I like to do is pretty basic. I take it, hook it up to HDMI, hook it up to power, and power on the console. As you can see, we get green light, so this console seems to be working right off the bat. I also make sure to check the DVD drive here. It is opening and closing easily, which is a very good sign as well too. Now, I do something here that I'm not sure many shops do, but this is just something I did back in the day. If you have an online enabled system, such as a PlayStation 3, an Xbox 360, or even newer stuff, of course, like a PlayStation 4, Xbox One, what I also like to do is real quick test it with Xbox Live or whatever network it is on. That way, you know if the system has been banned or not. Trust me, I know that's something that not many people think of, but when I worked at a game shop before, there was at least a couple times we had accidentally taken in banned systems because we didn't check them. I didn't do it super thoroughly here. I did make sure the live services were up and running, but as you can see, it didn't do a full live check on here, but from what I can tell, this seems to be fine, so I'm not too worried about it. Now, this console didn't come with a hard drive, so we don't have to worry about that, but it does have a DVD drive in here, and even better, it actually came with a free game right here. It had Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, so we're already a little bit ahead. What I do here is just test out the DVD drive, make sure it works. So here we can see that both the game and the DVD drive are working just fine. If you want to, you could test the DVD drive here by installing the game onto some storage, but I decided not to do that here. I'm just going to trust it for now at least. But the good news is all seems to be in working order. So with that, I'm going to take out the game, turn off the console, disconnect it, and we're going to start ripping it apart. At this point, however, I do want to clarify that many game shops would simply just clean the outside of this decently well, pair it with a hard drive, a controller, cables, and package it up to sell. This is fine if this is a used console, because that's what it would be classified as. However, this would not fit the mold of a refurbished console. But we are going to be taking this console and refurbishing it, even though it is fully working. So let's rip right into it. This step here, I'm going to say is optional, and I just did it because not only I wanted to cleanly remove the warranty seal, but I also just wanted to do this here for fun on video. You see, there's this warranty seal that you can see when you remove the faceplate in order to get into the system. Now, to this, it's pretty easy to bypass this one in particular. You really just need heat. So if you have a hair dryer, just take it, run it on high about an inch or two away from the system for about 2 minutes or so, and then at that point you can take something such as a blade or something just fine, a metal piece like this, and slowly remove it while still applying heat. As you can see, I was able to remove the sticker completely cleanly, so now I have a nice warranty seal to work with or put on something else, and there's no residue left over on the console itself. Next up, we have to remove the top and bottom side panels. Each of these panels has 6 tabs that you need to release, and I am happy to report here that none of the tabs were damaged in this process. Next, we're now going to separate the bottom of the casing from the rest of the system. Now, the Xbox 360 opening tool I'm using here is not required, but it makes removing these tabs so much easier, because not only it really prevents having any type of physical damage on the casing itself, but it's so easy to release the 2 tabs near the power plug and the 5 tabs up at the top near the AV port all at once. Plus, on top of this, I'm able to release these again without damaging them. You will have to come around to the front and you're going to have to unbuckle these 4 right here. Again, none of these were damaged. With the bottom of the case removed, we can also pop off the eject button so that doesn't get in the way. Awesome, now let's start taking out the screws. What I like to do is I like to start with the 6 long screws and then flip the console right side up, remove the top portion of the case, and from there you can remove some of the extra pieces. Next, we can remove the rest of these screws to release the motherboard, release the X clamps, and also release the RF board. And then we can take everything out. From here you can inspect the motherboard, and this one here looks pretty good. Thankfully it came from a smoke-free home because there's no nicotine or tar stuck to the console, and the good thing about that is with these consoles that come from smoke-free homes, even if they're dirty on the inside, most of the time if you just blow some air around here really well, all of this dirt and junk will just come right off the system. So that's pretty nice. Now, typically from what I've seen from some of the DKOldies systems that have been ripped apart, they are opened up, and if they get to this point, then dust is blown out right here, but there's not much else that's happening to the motherboard here, unfortunately. What I did this part off camera, but I took these components into my garage and I used my little shop vac to blow air onto them, and it did clean them up pretty nicely. If you have a shop vac or if you have compressed air or anything like that, you can use that as well too. As for the chassis and the plastic pieces, you can use a towel or a shirt to wipe these down. Now again, here is something that's going to be really important, which sets this apart from being a regular used console or an improperly refurbished system. We're going to be taking off the X clamps here so we can release the CPU and GPU heat sinks. We're then going to remove the old thermal paste that's from 2008, 2009, and then we're going to replace it with fresh new thermal paste. With systems like this is absolutely paramount. Remember, these are old systems at this point, they get quite hot, and if you are expecting a refurbished system, you need to expect your console refurbisher to do this right here. This is incredibly important. It's not all that hard to do if you're refurbishing the system, and it doesn't cost that much. But at the same time, it does a great amount of preventive maintenance to the system. Now everyone has their own preferences and such for doing this here. I'm just going to show what I'm doing. Here I still use the Arctic-Clean solution. Yes, I know you can use something else such as just isopropyl alcohol here, but you know what? Arctic-Clean, I like to have it on hand. I guess it's kind of a symptom from working on the 360 years ago, and it works super well. For this, all I do is I take the #1 solution, which is really supposed to break this stuff apart, put it on the CPU die, the GPU die, as well as the heat sinks. Once I leave it there for a bit, you can then wipe it off. Typically I use a paper towel for the flat surfaces like the heat sinks, and then I'll use a Q-tip here for the GPU and CPU. I then go over it here a second time, and thankfully I only needed to go over this twice. Next, you can use the purifier solution if you're using what I'm using, and again, I just went over this twice using the exact same method as before. Now you might notice on the CPU and GPU substrates, there could be a little bit of thermal paste that still gets stuck in the tiny components around here. It is super annoying to get out, and really the best way I found of doing this has been isopropyl alcohol and an old toothbrush. Don't use a toothbrush that you have used in your mouth or anyone else's mouth. I'd really recommend just using a toothbrush that is designated only for electronics. And you don't want to be super hard with this. You just want to be gentle, but make sure you're doing this properly. However, just soak it up with some isopropyl alcohol and then clean the components here. As you can see, it cleans them all super well, and any little leftover old thermal paste is removed. From here, you can apply fresh thermal paste. Everybody has their own variants and their own favorite versions of thermal paste, saying this one's better, that one is better. There's pastes that are better than other ones. I personally use Arctic MX4. Even if you want to use something older like Arctic Silver 5, that's still fine as well too. If you want to use better stuff, that's fine. It doesn't really matter here. Just don't use cheap thermal paste. The stuff that is going to be like super watery and not do anything. For this, all I do is apply it on the dies, and I don't spread it because I just use the pressure from the X clamps and the heat sinks to reapply it on here. For this here, you can see I'm just taking the heat sinks, plopping them back onto the motherboard, and then affixing them using the X clamps. So awesome. I would say in terms of maintenance here, one of the hardest parts is now complete. Now let's go ahead and work on the DVD drive. Thankfully, I will say this DVD drive is in pretty good shape. It looks quite good, but I'm still going to open it up and work on it a little bit. Now, as you can see here, the DVD drive is still pretty clean for the most part, but what I do is I take some Q-tips with isopropyl alcohol and I just go in and clean the components and such, kind of like this. I'll get the sides, I'll get the disc tray itself, and of course the laser. Now, the laser, you want to clean that using its own Q-tip end that is really only designated for the laser, and of course isopropyl alcohol. I use 99% for all of this here. There's also a drive belt right here, which just looks like a super thick rubber band. This one seems to be fine because the drive is opening and closing with ease, but what I'm going to do here is remove it and replace it because I have a pack of them and this is a pretty cheap part to replace. Now I will say some people might choose to replace the laser here, but in my experience, and this is what I personally do, usually I like to test a game or two by installing them on one of these systems. And if the discs are installing just fine, if I'm not hearing the disk drive make any weird noises like it's not struggling, it's not taking an astronomical amount of time to install the game, it's not making any odd noises like screeching or squealing at me, then I'm going to trust the laser here. So typically if the laser is working well, I like to keep the existing one in there. Now for the longest and most difficult task in my opinion here, taking all the plastic pieces and cleaning them. What I personally like to do is take all the plastic pieces and submerge them into a tub or a sink or something else you might have with warm water and soap. That's really all I do here. I'm just using my bathtub for this. Now, once I've let all the plastic soak for a bit, you can then just use some elbow grease and a sponge to clean off these parts. This helps immensely getting dirt out of little crevices, wiping away oils, and of course, getting rid of this writing here at the bottom of the system. I will say this was a lot more annoying to take off and took longer with a sponge and water right here. If I used something like a magic eraser, it would have gotten the job done much faster. However, I tend not to use those a ton just because they can kind of scuff up the case a little bit if you're not careful with them. If you just go crazy with a magic eraser, it's going to be really obvious that you went crazy with a magic eraser. I do also want to highlight, because not everyone might have a tub, if you don't have a tub, you can use a sink. And I will also say, I'm aware that DKOldies probably doesn't have a tub for something like this. Well, DKOldies is a pretty big operation from what I've seen, and I would hope that if they had something like this, they would have an ultrasonic cleaner or something along those lines. I personally don't have an ultrasonic cleaner, but they are fantastic for dirty, nasty motherboards as well as components such as this. Again, just restating here, I am not a game shop, I am just working with what I have here at home. Now this will be the longest part of the refurbishing process specifically, but once you feel like your cleaning is up to par, you can then drain out the water, and you are going to want to rinse these off, of course, with water to get all of the soap and such off of here, and you can look at your work a bit. From here, you now need to let these dry. Typically, what I do is after I rinse them, I leave them out overnight on an old towel, and I prefer to let them dry for at least 24 hours, but you want to do it at minimum overnight. Now, about 24 hours later, I came back over, and I just did a quick spot check to my work, and from what I could see, it all seemed to be pretty good. So from here, you can just work backwards and put everything back together. Now you might notice that the plastics are going to look and feel quite clean. However, they might have some soap spots or even some water spots on them. I guess it'd be water spots here. But if those are bugging you, that's nothing that, just wiping this down real quick with a shirt, a towel, or even some like a microfiber cloth will help out with. So you can just do that for the final process right here once it's all back together.
So boom, check this out. We're done. The console is still working, all of the tabs are intact as well too, and the best part, we don't have any leftover screws, which if you've ever worked on electronics, that's a really good sign right there, when you can take it all apart, put it back together, and you don't have any spare screws kicking around all over the place. With a console as clean as this, inside and out, with fresh thermal paste to last, I would be more than happy if I had to sell this console and label it as a refurbished console. Now, I do want you all to keep in mind here, what I did in this video up until now should be the bare minimum as to what should be expected for a business such as DKOldies if they are going to be refurbishing a console and selling it as a refurbished unit, especially with something that is optical drive based such as the Xbox 360 here. I do find it disturbing that there's consoles like this which are as old as they are here, they're going out without being opened up at times it seems, and especially going out without being properly repasted. Now there might also be people who are here at the end who are saying, oh, you could have done this better, you should have done that, you could have done that better, and you know what? You might be right. I'll give that to you. You might be right. However, do keep in mind that I am just a standard end user. I am a hobbyist at best. I am not running a big professional operation and a big business like DKOldies is. Now, there might be some people who are complaining and saying that this isn't worth the time, this is so much effort, this takes so long to do. And you could be right as well too. But if you're one of those people, I am going to ask you, why would a console that hasn't been refurbished be sold as a refurbished console. The idea here is that all of that effort I just showed you in all the minutes prior to this here is effort that you should not ever have to partake in. That's stuff that you should not ever have to do because you are purchasing a refurbished console. Do keep in mind, I did spend a whole lot of time and effort working on the system right here. I'm not going to say it just took like 5 minutes of work, all right? And again, time is money right here. Time is the thing that we don't get more of in life, so that is valuable. However, keep in mind, I'm also just one person, and a big professional operation like DKOldies should have an entire staff of people who would be able to work on stuff like this, get paid for it as well too, and honestly, they should be doing a much better job than I just did right here. Now, if you don't want to pay that premium for the refurbished experience, you can do what I did. You can go to a local thrift shop, you can buy one of these consoles for hopefully quite cheap, then you can bring it home, test it, make sure it works to some extent, then, do any repairs that are needed, clean it up, get it all refurbished yourself. So that way you end up saving a whole lot of money on the refurbishing experience. Or don't. That's totally up to you. However, if you want a refurbished system and you don't want to spend all that time, well, you can find a shop that seems to be trustworthy, that seems to be trusted, that seems to refurbish their consoles, and then pay a premium to get your favorite console that you're looking for that's also had all of this preventive maintenance and cleaning done to it already. However, I am going to leave you all with this question here before we wrap up this video. What would you call a shop that seems to specialize and label and sell consoles at a premium, labeling them as refurbished consoles, but they're not actually refurbishing them, or at best, they're not refurbishing them well? I just want to know what you would call that. And remember, one last thing, if you are purchasing used consoles, cleaning up the outside of a console, removing some scuffs, never opening it, and blowing air into the vents is not properly refurbishing a console. That is called selling a used console and making it look presentable. That's all it is. There is a difference between a used console and a refurbished console. Anyways, that is about it for this video here. I hope you all enjoyed it. I did get to have some fun with this here, and it was nice to really have a nice, I would say, very clean, shiny looking Xbox 360 at this point. So this thing is all ready to go for some good games, just like Halo 3 back there. Anyways, that is about it for this video here. If you enjoyed this video, a like would absolutely be appreciated. If you didn't like it, a dislike is fine as well too. But as I always say, this is Mr. Mario, signing off. Thank you all for watching, everyone.